The bond that never breaks. First meeting. The July heat at Fort Braxton pressed down like a physical weight. Training field seas shimmered in the distance as Major Ryan Mitchell squinted against the glare. Sweat trickled down his neck, darkening the collar of his already damp uniform. "They're bringing him in now, sir," the sergeant said, nodding toward the approaching jeep. Ryan shifted his weight from one foot to the other. After 3 tours in Afghanistan as an explosives expert, he wasn't easily rattled. But this was different. He'd never had a K-9 partner before. The jeep pulled to a stop, and Master Sergeant Wilson stepped out with a leash in hand. At the end of that leash stood the most alert German Shepherd Ryan had ever seen. "This is Maverick," Wilson said, his voice gruff but tinged with unmistakable pride. 14 months old, top of his class in detection training. Ryan locked eyes with the dog, and something electric passed between them. Maverick's ears perked forward, intelligent brown eyes studying Ryan with an intensity that seemed almost human. "He's magnificent," Ryan said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Wilson smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. "He's been waiting for you." The handler passed the leash to Ryan, and Maverick's posture changed immediately. His body tensed, alert and ready, as if he'd been assigned a mission of the utmost importance. "You two have 6 weeks of bonding training before deployment," Wilson explained. "Make them count." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of the leash in his hand. So light, yet somehow the most significant thing he'd ever held. "Hey there, Maverick," he said softly, crouching down to eye level with the dog. "Looks like we're partners now." Maverick tilted his head slightly, ears twitching as he processed Ryan's voice. Then, without warning, he leaned forward and pressed his nose briefly against Ryan's cheek. A gesture so gentle it left the hardened soldier momentarily speechless. Wilson chuckled. "Well, I'll be damned. That's the fastest I've ever seen him take to someone." Over the following weeks, Ryan and Maverick became inseparable. They trained from sunrise to sunset, detection exercises, command responses, terrain navigation, and simulated combat scenarios. They ate together, ran together, and eventually, they even slept in the same quarters when Ryan snuck Maverick into his barracks against regulations. The night before their deployment, Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Maverick dozed at the foot of his bed. "We're shipping out tomorrow, buddy," he whispered. Maverick's ears twitched, though his eyes remained closed. "I need you to know something." The dog lifted his head, suddenly alert. "I've never had someone I trusted completely at my back," Ryan continued, his voice barely audible. "Until now." Maverick patted up the bed and settled beside Ryan, his warm weight pressed against the soldier's side. In that moment, Ryan knew they were no longer handler and dog. They were brothers in arms. Into the fire. Kandahar province shimmered like a mirage under the relentless Afghan sun. Ryan and Maverick had been in country for just over 3 months, but it felt like years. They'd already completed 27 successful missions, mostly route clearances and building sweeps, establishing themselves as one of the most effective K-9 teams in the regiment. Today's mission was supposed to be routine, a small village on the outskirts of the province, suspected of housing a weapons cache. Ryan's unit moved in formation down the dusty main street, with him and Maverick taking point. The villagers watched from doorways, their expressions unreadable. Captain James "Jimmy" Westbrook, Ryan's closest friend in the unit, flanked his left side. "Village is too quiet," he muttered. "I don't like it." Ryan nodded, feeling the same unease. He kept his eyes scanning the buildings while Maverick led the way, nose working the air currents, ears constantly moving. Suddenly, Maverick froze. Every soldier in the unit recognized that posture. It was the alert that had saved their lives more times than they could count. Ryan raised his fist, halting the patrol. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Maverick's gaze was fixed on a small shed about 30 yards ahead. His body was rigid, tail straight. Building on the right, Ryan called back to his commanding officer. "Maverick's got something." Before they could establish a perimeter, the world exploded. The blast knocked Ryan off his feet, sending him tumbling into the dirt. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound. Through the dust and debris, panic seized him. "Maverick!" he screamed, though he couldn't even hear his own voice. He scrambled to his knees, disoriented, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. The scene around him was chaos, soldiers taking cover, returning fire at unseen enemies. But Ryan's focus narrowed to one thing only. Where was Maverick? Then he saw him. The German Shepherd was dragging himself toward Ryan, favoring his right side. Relief flooded through Ryan, quickly followed by horror as he noticed the dark stains spreading across Maverick's flank. Ryan crawled to him, debris raining down as bullets tore through the air above them. He reached Maverick and pulled the dog close, examining the wound. Shrapnel had torn into his side, but the bleeding wasn't arterial. "You're going to be okay," Ryan promised, tearing open a field dressing. "Stay with me, buddy." Maverick's eyes never left Ryan's face, even as he worked to bandage the wound. The trust in those eyes was absolute, unwavering. Then, incredibly, Maverick struggled to stand. "No, boy. Stay down," Ryan urged, but Maverick ignored him. The dog turned his head toward a collapsed building across the street, his posture tensing again despite his injury. Ryan followed his gaze and saw movement. A figure slipping away through the rubble, something clutched in his hands. "Contact, 10 o'clock," Ryan shouted, raising his rifle. But before he could take aim, Maverick was moving, a blur of tan and black fur launching across the street despite his wounds. "Maverick, no!" Ryan screamed, but it was too late. The German Shepherd tackled the figure to the ground just as the man raised what Ryan now saw was a detonator. Maverick's jaws clamped around the man's arm, forcing him to drop the device. Ryan sprinted across the open ground, bullets kicking up dust at his feet. He reached them in seconds, securing the enemy combatant while Maverick maintained his grip, blood still seeping through his bandages. Only when Ryan gave the command did Maverick release the man. Later, at the forward operating base, the medic finished stitching Maverick's wound. "He shouldn't have been able to move like that, much less take down an enemy," the medic said, shaking his head in disbelief. "This dog is something else." Ryan knelt beside the examination table, gently stroking Maverick's head. "He saved the entire unit," he said quietly. "That second detonator would have taken us all out." Maverick's eyes were heavy with pain medication, but he still managed to lick Ryan's hand once before drifting off to sleep. That night, Ryan broke protocol again, sleeping on the floor next to Maverick's recovery crate, one hand stretched through the bars to rest on his partner's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "I've got you," he whispered in the darkness. "Always." Shared scars. The mountains of eastern Afghanistan stretched like jagged teeth against the dawn sky. Ryan and Maverick had been together for 2 years now, earning decorations and developing an almost supernatural connection. They no longer needed verbal commands for most operations. A glance, a subtle hand gesture, or even just a shift in Ryan's breathing was enough for Maverick to understand what was needed. Their current mission was high risk. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a compound nestled deep in hostile territory. Ryan's unit would be operating with minimal support, far from backup. "I don't like this one," Jimmy said as they geared up in the pre-dawn darkness. "Too many variables, too little intel." Ryan checked Maverick's tactical vest, making sure it was secure without restricting movement. "When has that ever stopped us?" Jimmy's expression remained grim. "Just keep that four-legged guardian angel of yours close." The insertion went smoothly, a low-altitude drop 5 miles from the target. They moved silently through the mountainous terrain, Maverick scouting ahead, occasionally doubling back to check on Ryan. Near the compound, they split into 2 teams. Ryan, Maverick, Jimmy, and 2 other soldiers would approach from the east. The second team would create a diversion from the west. "Remember, we need him alive," the commander's voice crackled through their comms. Confirmation before extraction. The compound appeared deserted as they approached, which immediately set Ryan's nerves on edge. Maverick sensed it too, his body language changing subtly. Ears more alert, steps more cautious. "Something's not right," Ryan whispered to Jimmy. As if in answer, Maverick suddenly froze, his attention fixed on the ground ahead. Ryan recognized the alert. "Explosives." "IED," he called softly, halting the team. "Maverick's got something." They watched as the German Shepherd carefully traced the edges of what appeared to be a buried pressure plate. Ryan marked its location with infrared spray visible only through their night vision goggles. "Good boy," he whispered, giving Maverick's ear a quick scratch. "Find more." What they discovered was disturbing, not just one IED, but an entire perimeter of them surrounding the compound. This wasn't a hasty defense. It was a carefully planned trap. "We need to abort," Jimmy insisted. "They're expecting us." But before Ryan could respond, gunfire erupted from the western approach. The diversion team was engaged. "Team 2 is taking heavy fire," the radio squawked. "Multiple hostiles need immediate assistance." Their mission parameters shifted instantly from capture to rescue. Ryan signaled to Maverick, pointing toward the safe path through the IEDs they had already mapped. "Lead the way, boy." They moved swiftly but cautiously, following Maverick through the deadly maze. As they reached the compound wall, more gunfire erupted, this time from multiple directions. "It's an ambush," Jimmy shouted as they dove for cover. Ryan pressed against the wall, Maverick tight against his leg. He could hear shouting in Pashto from inside the compound. They were being surrounded. "We need to reach Team 2, Ryan said. "Maverick can find a path." But as they prepared to move, a grenade arced over the wall, landing just feet from their position. There was no time to think. "Grenade," Ryan shouted, shoving Jimmy away from the blast radius. In the same instant, Maverick lunged forward, grabbing the grenade in his jaws. Ryan's heart stopped as he realized what his partner was doing. Maverick, no. The German Shepherd was already racing away from the team, carrying the live grenade toward an empty ravine. Ryan scrambled to his feet, but it was too late. The explosion lit up the night, sending dirt and debris skyward. "Maverick!" Ryan screamed, abandoning cover and running toward the blast site, heedless of the gunfire around him. Through the settling dust, he saw a shape moving. Impossibly, unbelievably, Maverick was alive. The German Shepherd was limping badly, his tactical vest shredded, but he was moving. Ryan reached him just as Maverick's legs gave out. The dog had dropped the grenade at the last possible second, diving for cover, but had still taken shrapnel across his back and left hindquarters. "I've got you," Ryan choked out, gathering his partner in his arms. "I've got you." Jimmy appeared beside them, laying down covering fire. "We need to move, now." Ryan lifted Maverick, feeling the dog's warm blood soaking through his uniform. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered. "Don't you dare leave me." The extraction was a blur of gunfire, shouting, and the deafening beat of helicopter rotors. Ryan refused to let go of Maverick, cradling the injured dog during the entire flight back to base. In the medical tent, the veterinarian worked for hours extracting shrapnel, repairing damaged muscle, and stabilizing Maverick's condition. "He shouldn't be alive," the vet said finally, wiping blood from his hands. "That kind of sacrifice. I've never seen anything like it." Ryan sat beside Maverick's crate through the night, his own injuries untreated despite the medics' protests. When Maverick finally opened his eyes around dawn, Ryan couldn't hold back the tears. "You stupid, brave dog," he whispered, pressing his forehead against the crate. "Don't you ever do that again." Maverick's tail thumped weakly against the floor of the crate, once, twice. His eyes, though clouded with pain, held the same unwavering trust they always had. 6 weeks later, both were awarded for their actions that night. Ryan received a Silver Star, and Maverick became one of the few military dogs to receive the K9 Medal of Courage. But the real testament to their bond was the matching scars they now carried. Maverick across his back and hindquarters, Ryan across his heart. Coming home, the plane touched down at Denver International with a gentle bump that still managed to jolt Ryan awake. Beside him, Maverick lifted his head from where it had been resting on Ryan's thigh, ears perked in alert curiosity. "We're home, buddy," Ryan said, rubbing the spot between Maverick's ears that had gone gray over their 5 years of service together. Home. The word felt strange in his mouth, foreign somehow. After 3 tours and countless missions, they were finally done. Honorably discharged, decorated, and, according to his sister Samantha, long overdue for some peace and quiet. Maverick was officially retired as well. The military had offered to let Ryan adopt him. A formality, really, since separating them had never been an option. The German Shepherd service record was legendary. 97 successful explosive detections, 36 combat missions, and 13 confirmed life-saving interventions. The incident with the grenade had left him with a permanent limp in his left hind leg, but his spirit remained unbroken. The passengers around them gave respectful nods as they disembarked. Maverick's service vest and Ryan's uniform told their story without words. Sam was waiting at the arrivals gate, jumping up and down and waving frantically. Ryan broke into a smile despite the exhaustion pulling at him. His little sister hadn't changed, still the same boundless energy and infectious enthusiasm. "You're finally home," she squealed, throwing her arms around him. Then she knelt down to Maverick's level. "And you," the hero himself, Maverick, normally reserved with strangers, seemed to make an exception for Sam. He sniffed her carefully, then allowed her to scratch behind his ears, his tail wagging gently. "He remembers you from your visit to the base," Ryan said, surprised. Sam beamed. "Of course he does. We shared a steak when you weren't looking." The drive to Pine Ridge took just over an hour. Ryan watched the Colorado landscape roll by, so different from the harsh terrain they'd left behind. Beside him in the back seat, Maverick stayed alert, taking in every new sight and smell. "I fixed up Dad's old cabin like I promised," Sam said, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "It's all ready for you too. Plenty of land, no neighbors for at least a mile in any direction." Ryan nodded, grateful. The thought of crowds, of constant noise and movement, had been keeping him awake at night. "Sounds perfect. The town's changed some since you left. New grocery store, couple of new restaurants. Oh, and Dr. Winters retired. His daughter took over the practice. She's got experience with service animals, by the way." Ryan listened to his sister's chatter, letting it wash over him. It was comforting, this glimpse of normal life, of concerns that didn't involve survival or strategic objectives. The cabin appeared around a bend in the dirt road, a sturdy A-frame nestled among towering pines. Their father had built it decades ago, a retreat from his own military service. It seemed fitting that Ryan would return here now. "Home sweet home," Sam announced, pulling up to the front porch. The moment Ryan opened the car door, Maverick was out, sniffing the air, taking in the pine-scented breeze. His posture changed immediately. The alertness of being on mission softened into something looser, more curious. "I think he approves," Ryan said, watching as Maverick explored the perimeter of the clearing, nose working overtime. "There's a stream about 50 yards behind the cabin," Sam said. "I bet he'll love that." The first few weeks of civilian life were challenging. Ryan discovered that he'd forgotten how to sleep through the night without waking at the slightest sound. Maverick would pace restlessly at times, especially during thunderstorms that sounded too much like distant artillery. But slowly, day by day, they adjusted. Morning routines became treasured rituals rather than tactical necessities. Coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise filter through the pines. Long walks through the forest, Maverick limping slightly, but never slowing down. Neither of them could fully leave the past behind. Ryan's nightmares and Maverick's storm anxiety made that clear, but they were learning to live with the scars. They became familiar figures in Pine Ridge. The townsfolk quickly learned to ask before approaching Maverick, and in return, he gradually accepted their presence without going on high alert. Ryan found unexpected peace in the simplicity of small-town interactions, the nod from the hardware store owner, the quiet respect at the local diner. Jimmy visited during that first summer, bringing stories from their old unit and updates on mutual friends. He watched Ryan and Maverick move around each other with the same seamless coordination they'd had in the field. "You two look good," he observed one evening as they sat on the porch. "Peaceful." Ryan nodded, watching Maverick doze at his feet. "We're getting there. The unit's not the same without you," Jimmy admitted. "That new K9 team they brought in, they're good, but they're not you and Maverick." "We had our time," Ryan said simply. Later that night, after Jimmy had gone to bed in the spare room, Ryan sat alone by the dying embers of the fire pit. Maverick rested his head on Ryan's knee, those intelligent brown eyes reflecting the glowing coals. "We did good, didn't we?" Ryan whispered, running his fingers through Maverick's graying fur. "Made it out alive. That's more than some can say." Maverick sighed contentedly, his tail brushing against the wooden deck. As the years passed, their bond only deepened. They settled into a rhythm of quiet, purposeful days. Ryan eventually took a part-time job with the local search and rescue team, where Maverick's skills, despite his age and limp, proved invaluable. They found lost hikers, tracked missing children, and once, memorably, located an elderly man with dementia who had wandered into the national forest during a snowstorm. Time left its mark on both of them. Gray crept further into Maverick's muzzle, and the shrapnel wounds in his hindquarters troubled him more during cold weather. Ryan's own body carried similar reminders. Old fractures that ached before rain, scars that pulled tight in winter. 8 years into their retirement, Ryan noticed Maverick struggling to climb the cabin stairs. Without comment, he built a gently sloping ramp alongside them. When jumping into the truck became too difficult, Ryan fashioned a sturdy step. They adapted together, without fuss or complaint. It was during their 10th year of retirement that Ryan began to feel tired. Not the familiar exhaustion of a long day, but something deeper, more persistent. He ignored it at first. He was in his 40s now, after all. But Maverick noticed. The German Shepherd would watch him with concerned eyes, staying closer than usual, sometimes nudging Ryan's hand when he'd been sitting too long. "I'm fine, buddy," Ryan would assure him. "Just getting old, like you." But the fatigue worsened, and with it came pain, dull at first, then sharp and insistent. When Ryan finally saw the doctor, Maverick refused to leave his side, growling softly when the nurse suggested he wait outside. "He stays," Ryan said firmly, and no one argued further. The diagnosis came on a crisp autumn day. Advanced stage pancreatic cancer. Inoperable. 6 months, maybe less. Ryan sat in his truck in the hospital parking lot for a long time afterward, one hand buried in Maverick's fur. The German Shepherd sensed his distress, pressing closer, offering silent comfort. "Looks like we've got one more mission, old friend," Ryan said finally, his voice rough. "But this time, I don't think we're both coming back." The final watch. The winter that followed Ryan's diagnosis was the coldest in Pine Ridge's recent memory. Snow piled in great drifts against the cabin, and the wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal. Inside, a different kind of cold had settled, the chill of approaching loss, of time running too fast and too slow all at once. Sam had moved in temporarily, taking over the spare room and the daily responsibilities that were becoming too much for Ryan. She cooked, cleaned, managed his medications, and drove him to appointments. But it was Maverick who provided the most constant comfort. The aging German Shepherd rarely left Ryan's side now. When pain kept Ryan awake at night, Maverick would rest his head on the bed beside him, offering silent companionship through the darkest hours. During better days, when Ryan could sit on the porch wrapped in blankets, Maverick would lie at his feet, both of them watching the snow fall in comfortable silence. Jimmy visited frequently, often bringing other members of their old unit. They would gather around Ryan's bed, sharing stories and laughter that temporarily pushed back the shadow of what was coming. "Remember that time in Kandahar when Maverick found that cache of weapons?" Jimmy would say. The look on the captain's face when he realized it was 3 times bigger than intelligence had estimated. And Ryan would smile, reaching down to scratch Maverick's ears. "Always exceeding expectations, weren't you, buddy?" As winter gave way to spring, Ryan weakened. The doctors had been right about the timeline. 6 months was proving optimistic. He had lost weight, his once strong frame now gaunt beneath the blankets. But his eyes remained clear and focused, especially when they rested on Maverick. One mild April evening, as Sam prepared dinner in the kitchen, Ryan called her into his room. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice thin but determined. Sam sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand. "Anything. Take care of Maverick when I'm gone." His gaze shifted to the German Shepherd lying beside the bed. "He's 13 now, old for his breed, but he's still got some good time left." Sam squeezed his fingers. "You know I will. He'll come home with me." Ryan nodded. "And one more thing." He hesitated. "When it happens, let him see me. Don't keep him away. He needs to understand." Sam's eyes filled with tears. "Ryan, promise me," he insisted. "He's been with me through everything. He deserves to be there at the end too." She wiped at her cheeks. "I promise." The end came more swiftly than anyone expected. One morning in late April, Ryan didn't wake up when Sam brought his medication. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale and cool to the touch. The hospice nurse who had been visiting weekly said it would be hours, maybe a day at most. Word spread quickly. By noon, the cabin was filled with people, friends from town, former military colleagues, neighbors who had come to respect the quiet man and his loyal dog. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing memories, offering support to Sam. Maverick sensed the change immediately. He refused to leave Ryan's bedside, his aging body alert despite the arthritis that had stiffened his joints. His eyes rarely left Ryan's face, as if keeping watch for his partner's final mission. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-capped mountains in shades of pink and gold, the visitors gradually departed. Only Sam, Jimmy, and the hospice nurse remained, along with Maverick, who maintained his silent vigil. "It won't be long now," the nurse said gently. "His breathing is changing." Sam nodded, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Jimmy stood by the window, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "He's not alone," the former soldier said roughly. "That's what matters." The room fell silent except for Ryan's increasingly labored breaths. Maverick's ears twitched with each subtle change, his body tense and watchful. Then, as the last light faded from the sky, Ryan drew one final, shuddering breath and was still. The nurse moved forward, checking for a pulse before shaking her head. "He's gone," she said softly. "I'm so sorry." Sam broke down, her sobs filling the quiet room. Jimmy placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his own grief evident in the tight lines of his face. Maverick, however, didn't move. He remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed on Ryan's face. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet, his arthritic joints protesting the sudden movement. With deliberate care, he placed his front paws on the edge of the bed. "Maverick," Sam began, reaching for him, but Jimmy stopped her. "Wait," he said. "Remember what Ryan asked." They watched as Maverick pulled himself up onto the bed, a feat he hadn't managed in months due to his age and injuries. With gentle movements, he settled beside Ryan's body, resting his graying muzzle on his partner's chest. His deep brown eyes remained open, alert, as if he was standing guard one final time. A strange hush fell over the room. Even Sam's sobs quieted. There was something solemn, almost sacred, in the way Maverick positioned himself, not in grief, but in duty. "He's keeping watch," Jimmy said softly. "One last mission." Through the night, Maverick refused to leave Ryan's side. The funeral home staff arrived, but waited patiently, understanding the unique circumstances. Sam dozed fitfully in a chair beside the bed, while Jimmy kept vigil from the doorway. As dawn broke over the mountains, bathing the room in soft golden light, something changed. Maverick, who had remained motionless for hours, suddenly lifted his head. His ears perked forward, his gaze focusing on something beyond the bed, something no one else could see. Sam stirred, awakened by the movement. "Maverick," she called softly. The German shepherd didn't respond. His attention remained fixed on the empty space near the foot of the bed. His tail, which had been still, gave a single, tentative wag. Jimmy straightened, the hairs on his arms rising. "Sam," he said quietly. "Look at him." Maverick's posture had shifted from mourning to alertness. His ears were fully erect now, his body tense with recognition. Then, incredibly, his tail wagged again, more confidently this time. "What is he looking at?" Sam whispered, her voice catching. Jimmy shook his head, unable to answer. But there was a certainty in his expression, a soldier's understanding of things that couldn't be explained but were no less real. Maverick remained focused on the invisible presence for several long moments. Then, gradually, he relaxed. His ears softened, his tail settled, and he lowered his head once more to Ryan's chest. But this time, it wasn't in grief or duty, it was in acceptance. When the funeral home staff finally approached, Maverick allowed them to come near. He watched with calm, knowing eyes as they prepared to take Ryan's body, and when Sam gently called him down from the bed, he complied without resistance. As they wheeled Ryan away, Maverick stood beside Sam, leaning slightly against her leg. His eyes followed the gurney until it disappeared from view, but the desperate grief they had all expected to see in him was absent. In its place was something else, a quiet understanding, a peace that transcended explanation. That night, as Sam sat on the porch watching the stars emerge above the mountains, Maverick limped out to join her. He settled at her feet with a soft sigh. "You saw him, didn't you?" she whispered, reaching down to stroke his graying muzzle. "Somehow you saw him." Maverick looked up at her, those intelligent brown eyes reflecting the starlight. He didn't need words to answer. Some bonds, his gaze seemed to say, were too strong to be broken, even by death itself. The last mission, St. Joseph's Church in Pine Ridge, had never been so full. People spilled out of the wooden pews into the aisles and stood along the back wall. Military uniforms mingled with civilian attire as the community gathered to honor Major Ryan Mitchell. The oak casket rested at the front of the church, draped with an American flag. Photographs of Ryan throughout his service career were displayed nearby, many featuring Maverick at his side. The largest, placed on an easel beside the casket, showed them receiving their medals after the grenade incident, both bearing fresh scars but standing proud. Sam sat in the front pew, dressed in black, her fingers worrying the tissue in her hands. Jimmy sat beside her, his uniform pressed and perfect, his face a carefully controlled mask of military stoicism. On Sam's other side, somewhat unusually, sat Maverick. The aging German shepherd wore his service vest, freshly brushed and adorned with his own medals. He sat upright despite his arthritis, his posture military straight, his eyes alert. Several people had questioned the wisdom of bringing him to the funeral, but Sam had been adamant. She had promised Ryan. As the chaplain began the service, Maverick's attention remained fixed on the casket. His ears moved slightly, tracking every sound, but his body remained still and disciplined. Major Ryan Mitchell served his country with exceptional courage and unwavering dedication, the chaplain said, his voice resonating through the hushed church. But those who knew him best understood that his greatest quality was his capacity for loyalty, a trait he shared with his extraordinary partner, Maverick. At the sound of his name, Maverick's ears perked up, but he didn't move from his position. The service continued with readings, prayers, and remembrances. Jimmy spoke, his voice occasionally catching as he recounted their missions together. Several other former unit members shared stories that brought both tears and laughter. Through it all, Maverick remained attentive but calm. Then, as the chaplain invited everyone to observe a moment of silence, something changed. Maverick stiffened, his gaze intensifying as he stared at the casket. A low whine escaped him, the first sound he had made since entering the church. Sam placed a gentle hand on his back. "It's okay," she whispered, but Maverick didn't seem to hear her. Without warning, he stood up. Every eye in the church turned to the German shepherd as he stepped into the aisle. Sam reached for him, but Jimmy stopped her. "Let him go," he said softly. "He needs this." Moving with slow, deliberate steps, Maverick approached the casket. His limp was pronounced, his aging body showing the strain of movement, but his purpose was unmistakable. The church fell silent, every person watching in breathless anticipation. When he reached the casket, Maverick paused. He sniffed once, twice, his nose working along the polished wood and the draped flag. Then, with unexpected agility, he rose up on his hind legs and placed his front paws on the edge of the casket. A collective gasp rippled through the church. Sam pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Jimmy stood up, instinctively moving closer, though whether to intervene or support wasn't clear. For a long moment, Maverick remained there, balanced against the casket, his gaze fixed on the flag as if he could see through it to Ryan's face. Then, using strength no one knew he still possessed, he pushed himself up and over, landing inside the half-open casket on top of Ryan's uniformed body. Murmurs of shock filled the church. The funeral director moved forward, alarmed, but Jimmy intercepted him. "Wait," he said firmly. "Just wait." Inside the casket, Maverick settled himself carefully on Ryan's chest, much as he had done that final night in the cabin. His head came to rest on Ryan's shoulder, his muzzle pressed against his partner's neck. The position was so natural, so familiar, it was as if they had lain this way 1,000 times before, as indeed they had, through cold desert nights and mountain patrols. The church fell into profound silence. No one moved, no one spoke. Even those who had never witnessed the bond between handler and military K9 could feel the power of what they were seeing. A connection that transcended words, transcended training, transcended even death itself. Maverick remained still, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and steady. The only movement was the slight rise and fall of his chest and the occasional flick of his ears. He wasn't distressed, he was where he belonged. Sam approached the casket slowly, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She reached in, gently stroking Maverick's back. "I know, boy," she whispered. "I know." The chaplain, recovering from his initial surprise, stepped forward again. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with emotion. "I believe," he said, addressing the stunned congregation, "that we are witnessing something sacred here. A reminder that love, true, selfless love, knows no boundaries." He paused, looking down at Maverick lying peacefully with his partner. The scripture tells us that greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Major Mitchell and Maverick demonstrated that love countless times on the battlefield. And now, even at the end, that love remains unbroken. Throughout the remainder of the service, Maverick stayed in the casket. When it came time for the flag folding ceremony, the honor guard worked carefully around him, their disciplined movements adapting to accommodate his presence. Not one of them suggested removing him. The commander of the honor guard approached Sam with the folded flag, his white gloves pristine against the blue fabric. On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. As Sam accepted the flag, cradling it against her chest, Maverick finally stirred. He lifted his head, looking directly at the folded triangle in her arms. His ears perked forward, his body tensing slightly, the posture of a working dog receiving a new command. The 21-gun salute echoed outside the church, each crack making the windows vibrate. Maverick didn't flinch. He remained focused, alert, as if standing guard over Ryan one final time. Then came the haunting notes of taps, the bugler's melody floating through the open doors. As the final note faded into silence, Maverick did something that left no dry eyes in the church. Slowly, deliberately, he placed one paw on Ryan's chest, directly over his heart. The gesture was unmistakable, a soldier's salute, a partner's goodbye, a final acknowledgement of their unbreakable bond. When it was time to close the casket, no one had the heart to force Maverick away. It was Jimmy who finally approached, kneeling beside the casket so that he was eye level with the German Shepherd. "Maverick," he said softly, his voice carrying in the hushed church. "At ease, soldier. Mission complete." For a moment, Maverick didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Ryan's face, as if memorizing it one last time. Then, with quiet dignity, he rose and stepped carefully out of the casket, landing with a soft thump on the church floor. He limped to Sam's side, pressing against her leg as the casket was closed. Together, they watched as Ryan was carried out of the church, followed by the solemn procession of mourners. At the cemetery, Maverick stood beside Sam as the casket was lowered into the ground. The spring breeze ruffled his fur, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. When it was time to place flowers on the casket, Sam knelt down and removed a single dog tag from Maverick's collar, the one that had always borne Ryan's information as his handler. "He'd want you to keep this," she whispered, threading it onto a chain around her neck. "But I think he'd want this one returned to him." She placed the second tag, the one with Maverick's information, on top of the casket. It was not standard protocol, not part of any military tradition, but to everyone present, it seemed entirely right. As people began to disperse, Maverick remained, his gaze fixed on the gravesite. Jimmy approached, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll wait by the car." Sam nodded, grateful. When they were alone, she knelt beside Maverick, wrapping an arm around his sturdy frame. "He loved you so much," she said, her voice breaking. "You were everything to him." Maverick leaned against her, some of the military stiffness leaving his aging body. His eyes, however, weren't focused on the grave anymore, but on a point just beyond it. Empty space to Sam's eyes, but clearly not to his. His ears perked forward, his head tilting slightly in that characteristic way that had always indicated recognition. Then, remarkably, his tail gave a single, decisive wag. Sam followed his gaze, seeing nothing but feeling something, a warmth, a presence, a sense of completeness that defied explanation. She didn't need to see what Maverick saw. The certainty in his posture, the recognition in his eyes, told her everything. "He's not really gone, is he?" she whispered. Maverick's tail wagged once more, and for the first time since Ryan's death, the tension in his body truly released. Whatever he had seen or sensed, it had given him what he needed, the assurance that their bond remained unbroken. As they walked away from the grave together, Maverick limped less, his head held higher. He wasn't searching anymore. He wasn't waiting. He had completed his final mission, seeing his partner home. In the months that followed, Maverick settled into life with Sam. His health declined gradually, the years and his old injuries finally catching up with him. But there was a peace about him that hadn't been there immediately after Ryan's death. A contentment that suggested he was no longer standing watch, but simply waiting his turn. On a crisp autumn evening, almost 6 months after Ryan's funeral, Maverick passed peacefully in his sleep, curled up on the rug beside Sam's bed. She found him in the morning, his body still but his expression serene. They buried him beside Ryan, without ceremony but with deep reverence. Sam placed his service vest and medals in a shadow box that hung in her living room, alongside Ryan's flag and the photographs of them together. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she would sit on her porch and imagine them together again, running across some distant field, whole and strong, handler and dog, brothers in arms. And sometimes, though she never told anyone this, she thought she could hear them. The faint sound of boots on grass, the jingle of dog tags, and the quiet, contented sigh of a German shepherd who had finally completed his longest, most important mission, loving his partner without condition, without fail, without end. Some bonds, after all, are too strong to be broken, even by death itself. In the heart of America's military bases, stories like Ryan and Maverick's unfold daily, not as fiction, but as living testaments to loyalty that transcends the battlefield. Working alongside veterans who've trained with K9 units, I've witnessed partnerships where words become unnecessary. A slight shift in posture or quick glance communicates volumes between handler and dog. These bonds aren't merely operational, they're sacred. Statistics tell us that over 2,500 military working dogs serve alongside our troops, but numbers fail to capture what science confirms. These animals experience genuine emotional attachment. When a veteran suffering from PTSD wakes screaming from nightmares, it's often their service dog who reaches them first, pressing against their side, grounding them to reality when memories threaten to overwhelm. At Walter Reed Medical Center, I watched a wounded Marine reunite with his German Shepherd partner after 3 months of separation. The dog, professional and disciplined his entire life, broke protocol completely, whimpering and pressing his head against the Marine's chest. Neither made a sound, neither needed to. What Ryan and Maverick share in fiction echoes through countless true stories where dogs refuse to leave fallen handlers, attend their funerals, or maintain vigils at their graves. These aren't just animals performing tasks. They're souls bound to ours through a language deeper than words. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. We hope it touched your heart and left you with something meaningful to reflect on. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next video.